Matt, now is the time.
Now is the best time.
So it's our top three, and a very, very, very special top three because with Diana having Matt here, let me bring the topic. Top three Walt Disney World Imagineering Marvels. We're going to start with our guest, Matt. Your number three was this one here, and I couldn't get a picture of that because it's I can't. For obvious reason. But this is your number three.
Yes, this is my number three, the Utilidors. Thank you for not getting a picture of it because I wouldn't want to see your show get into trouble for posting photos of that. I will say, if you want to do the Utilidors, you want to see the Utilidors, you actually can as a guest when they welcome back the Keys to the Kingdom tour at Magic Kingdom. That is how I have seen it as a guest. I've done that tour 3 times, and they'll take you into the Utilidors. So if you're ever curious about that underground city at Walt Disney World, that's a way to do it. Besides becoming a cast member, that's of course the other way. When you go through traditions, they show you the Utilidors as well. I had to put this was not in any particular order. This was just my stream of consciousness and thought when I was thinking about Imagineering Marvels, and ending up as number 3, it almost ended up in a way as my number 1, as sort of the ultimate Imagineering Marvel. And Disneyland, the background for this is Walt was walking through Disneyland one day, and he was in Tomorrowland and saw a cast member in Frontierland costume walking into his shift to go into Frontierland. But the problem was that here was this cowboy walking through Tomorrowland, and it just didn't fit. And Walt cared deeply about story and show, and everything had to fit when it came to story, and that was not a way to do it. So when he built Walt Disney World, he knew this was not going to be a problem, and Walt dreamed big, and of course that resulted in the massive land that is Walt Disney World to begin with. But then at the Magic Kingdom, he figured with this first park at Walt Disney World, rather than having cast members enter through the same gate and walk through different lands, and you'd see a Tomorrowland cast member in Adventureland or an Adventureland cast member in Fantasyland, that instead he would build this system of what many consider to be underground, I'm going to put underground in air quotes for a second, underground tunnels that service all the cast members, all the facilities. It carries garbage. So if you don't smell garbage at the Magic Kingdom, that's because there are these massive chutes, these massive tunnels. The HVAC system, the AVAC system, I should say. The AVAC system carries garbage literally under the Magic Kingdom at the speed of a moving car. There's the warehouses or all these rooms that house the equipment for the attractions, audio, just everything is down there. And that's how cast members get around as well. A little fun fact that I said, underground in air quotes, is because technically the Utilidors are not undergrounds. They are the ground level of Magic Kingdom. When you're looking at walking around the Magic Kingdom, the actual park level, that's actually the second floor of the park, 14 feet above ground, which is one of my favorite facts. And if you're ever lucky enough to, it's one thing you can't really see as easily from the places they take you on the Keys to the Kingdom tour. But if you are a cast member, if you get have the pleasure of being a cast member one day and enter into the Magic Kingdom through the Fantasyland backstage main Utilidor entrance, you can actually see, you're standing on ground level, you're looking around, there's streets, and you can actually see the bottom, the base of It's a Small World is 14 feet above you. And you get that scale and see that the Utilidors are actually the first level. So I geek out about this because it is such, when you talk about Imagineering Marvel, they literally built an entire park-wide system on the first level and said, you know what, then we're going to put the park itself on the second level. And it's not all Walt. That was Walt's vision for it, but it was Admiral Joe Fowler who was working with Walt, who came up with the specifics of designing that system. But man, when you talk about Imagineering Marvels, I had to make sure that was on there because it's just so cool.
Who is going to be the next one?
I can go.
Collin should go.
Well, I mean, mine's a little bit simpler, but I'm going to bring this one to the table because it is one that when I saw it for the first time, it kind of fascinated me because I didn't know what was going to happen. And it's actually, spoiler alert on this one if you've never experienced this attraction, It's Enchanted Tales with Belle, of all things. And I'm not like a huge fan of this attraction, but at the same time, this room, when you step into basically Maurice's workshop, is the way I understand it. Somebody correct me if I've got the story wrong. But as you stand there, you don't expect anything to happen, and then a piece of the wall that you think is just an ordinary piece transforms into a portal that you basically step through. And it's so eloquent the way that they do it that you would have no clue that it was a door or a hallway or however you want to explain what that ends up being. But if you're a first-time guest or you're not a guest that's been to the Disney parks much to see that type of effect in action, they do a similar thing at Runaway Railway of sorts. But if you've never experienced it, it is something that truly blows you away the first time because you have no idea that it's coming, and all of a sudden you're stepping through what was a wall. And to me, that's one of those little things, but it's also one of those big things that people will remember when they get home. So, like, if you see that and then they're reiterating the experience to their family or their friend, they'll say, "You will not believe this door that opened," and that kind of thing. It's like you're not going to see that anywhere else. So it had to make my list, even though it's maybe not my favorite attraction. It is one that continues to blow my mind, even though I'm a little bitter that they've never picked me for one of the nights.
Yeah, it's your turn, though.
Since you're asking
enthusiastic
everybody.
about it.
Yeah.
So my top three, my number three in my top three, unsurprisingly probably is the Tower of Terror, the Hollywood Tower of Terror. Also, which I'm also going to group into that because this is me, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout in Disney's California Adventure, because Tower of Terror isn't there anymore. But not only is this my favorite attraction, I think it is one of the best Imagineered attractions of all time. I think the everything from the ride mechanics and the safety that's built into this thing, the fact that you're never in free fall for real, you're controlled the entire time in terms of being pulled up and pulled down. But in Walt Disney World, the guide by wire mechanism, you think about, like, we're in this cage, in this metal cage, where we just like swooped up, and then we drive forward. Right, and we have all these things happening, and then we kind of lock into this next section, which is where kind of the main, so the main thrust of the attraction, the thrill happens. But all the while, you're like, this is all happening again and again and again, with all of these safety elements in place, and then there's the randomization that they introduced a few years back, which is incredible. But cut to California.
Scream.
It's so good,
or at least
and
try.
The story, the story and the effects are incredible. But then you cut to California, Disney's California Adventure, and these Imagineers took the same attraction, the same technology, like the bare bones of this thing, kept it all the same for the most part, except introduced the new overlays and the new video and the new storyline. But they also changed it using music and using the way that the mechanics work, and so you have much more like lift and bounce instead of drop. They took what was kind of a terrifying attraction to some people, Carlos, and turned it into this kind of exhilarating, fun attraction. For those of you who are, maybe have been on Tower of Terror and didn't like the drop effect, and you don't like the spookiness or whatever, Mission Breakout is a completely different experience.
Okay, let's go to my third option. I'm going not to an attraction or it is to a particular effect in Rise of the Resistance. And we're talking about the moment that the lightsaber start to cut the ceiling. The whole thing with that is because, actually, I will not spoil anything and I will tell, but it's not that is a marvelous technology thing that they did. That actually is a nice execution of something really simple, really simple. The fun thing is that the first time I saw that during D23 when they played the video, and I was with a friend that said no, it's just just for the video, they're not gonna do that. It is too perfect. And then you go to the ride for the first time and you experience that is amazing. Is a pretty simple secret with a really nice execution. Back to Matt for his second Marvel.
It's going to be Spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
So first of all, let me say, I could have easily monopolized this conversation with Rise of the Resistance, but I feel like my listeners are getting tired of me praising that attraction because it is so good, and I could give you 10 Imagineering illusions that I love from that attraction. But
I You're getting a little honorable mention in there.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Cheating like Jason.
I love it.
I'm good at sneaking those in. The Spaceship Earth is, when you think of it, you take it for granted. You look at it, you know, people love Spaceship Earth. Disney fans love Spaceship Earth. You go and you look at it and you could just stare at it. You take pictures in front of it, but not a lot of people know how that thing is actually doing what it does. It's a sphere that's on these 4 or 2, split into pieces supports. And so that's what you kind of think when you look at it. But it was not easy to build this. And they knew they wanted to build this sphere. And John Hench, who was really Walt's right-hand man when it came to Imagineering, he was one of the top Imagineers back in the day. John Hench wanted to build this. Walt had already passed, but John Hench was insistent that this be a sphere. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, no one had ever done this. They had conceptualized it. They had never done it before. So they knew the closest they could get was a large dome. If you've ever seen the Montreal Expo from back in, I forget the time period, it's probably the 60s, you could see that there's almost a completed sphere, but they couldn't complete it. They couldn't never do that. So it was on this base. When what the really interesting part is that if you wanted to visualize what that looks like in Montreal, take where the supports are on Spaceship Earth, draw a straight line across, and everything above that is what the Expo sphere looked like. Mm-hmm. And the reason why you draw that straight line right there is because what John Hench realized, and working with the engineers, the engineers told him that this was possible, but he was the one who thought, could this be done? That if you drew that straight line, took that dome, you elevated it above the ground, you put supports to hold it up, you could then complete it by putting the other part of the sphere suspended below it, and then seamlessly covering the outside in a single layer, which is over 11,000 tiles. Amazing. So this structure is actually 2 different structures put together, and it's almost like if you had a Spaceship Earth popcorn bucket, you twist it off the top. Kind of that idea, except you turn it upside down. Turn it upside down, and that's basically what this structure is. So just everybody, the fact that you walk past this and you don't think about how it was constructed, but the lengths they had to go through and the creativity to make that possible is ingenious.
Collin, let's go to your number 2.
This one's my softball. If you've ever been to California Adventure, you know what I'm going to say, and it's Radiator Springs Racers. I mean, I know it's a borrowed technology from Test Track and similar attractions, but at the same time, they took it to a whole nother level. From the canyon itself to the attraction to what you feel under the vehicle at certain points of the attraction, the sounds, it's just so expertly done. And Radiator Springs as a whole is a whole different conversation, but at the same time, it's incredible. And the depth of what you see versus what you see when you walk behind it when you're leaving the park, it's just incredible to think about what they had to do to make it a reality. And I could wax poetically about this, or at least try. I'm from Kentucky, for hours. But it is such a marvel of not just Imagineering, but ingenuity and creativity to make it come alive in such an expert way that they did. So that had to be on my list, but I'll keep that one pretty short. So if you've not experienced it, you have to experience it yourself to do any justice to it.
As we talk about Rise of the Resistance and now Radiator Springs Racers, these are I cannot say which is my favorite, but they're together my top in terms of Disney attractions, because there's a thing about Radiator Springs Racers. It's also the sound. Whenever you start,
it's incredible.
Yeah,
and the bridge and the waterfall.
That is. I love it.
We all love that.
So
part.
yeah, you feel so great there. It's amazing. Jason, you're number 2.
My number 2 is Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. Not only were the Tiki birds, super advanced for their time, but and they laid the foundation for all the animatronics that came later. But when you sit there and you watch what's happening, and you think, there's a lot of moving pieces in this place. There's a lot of stuff happening. And Matt mentioned Rise of the Resistance. So we know one of the problems with Rise of the Resistance is that there's so many things that have to happen in sequence and timed perfectly that's a lot of times that's why they have to kind of shut down, reboot, reset things, because a lot just has to happen. The Tiki Room, much simpler, obviously, but there's so many things happening at one time, especially that last scene, right? And it happens again and again and again for decades. It just blows my mind.
I remember the first time I was with little Carlos. When little Carlos went for the first time there, that's the first time I watched Tiki Room. It was to see the birds
the
breathing,
breath.
the breath. My number 2, it is. I would not say it's not so recent as Rise of the Resistance, but I'm talking about Expedition Everest, particularly the track switch thing, because we're talking about roller coaster track. Actually, 3 tracks together. From the moment you go up to that human, then you have to. You go back. Then when we stop and you see Shadow of the Yeti, if you're in the first place there for the car, you can see that the track switches in a way that you can take the other one. I have something here.
It's the age.
And I got from
I told you to stop bringing your art to this program.
But it is so simple in a way that it's just a switch. I have to bring you just a simple switch of the track, and then you go there. I don't know if you ever noticed that.
I don't know anything.
And then suddenly, instead
you're
going back to the same route that you came from.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The track does like this. And there's a detour for the other track. It is
Carlos,
amazing.
this almost made my top 3.
Yeah,
this almost made my top 3 because it is that ingenious.
It is ingenious.
Such a clever piece of track switch technology.
Yes,
what you're talking about, track switching.
Yes, just like that.
The Yeti breaks the track. We go in a different direction.
It doesn't matter if the Disco Yeti is not that dancing anymore. That doesn't matter. I always love that.
I think it's all the hair ties, frankly.
Carlos, that truly did. I think I wrote it at one point, wrote it down, and then I replaced it with this I guess this number 1 answer here, but it truly did almost make it on my list. Should I say what mine is before we show it? So mine's Flight of Passage. It's probably.
That's okay.
It's okay. I mean, I remember I got off and I was like, I've seen better.
The magical flight. And...
Yeah, it's the carousel of the park. You can take it or leave it. I only waited 2 hours for it. No, it's I said earlier that I get motion sickness on a lot of attractions, and especially screen-based attractions. So I don't do Star Tours. Star Tours makes me very motion sick.
Me too.
Can't do Mission Space.
Me too.
Flight of Passage. After hearing about it and seeing it and weighing the thought process in my head, I said, "All right, I'm going to do it." Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I had to do the same thing. I kind of had to psych myself up for it a little bit.
I was very anxious doing it, but then they did such a great job. Part of the reason for even feeling that way on that attraction is on any screen-based attraction is because the visuals don't match up with what you're feeling, and that's where the motion sickness comes from. But Flight of Passage is done so well that it doesn't matter that it's a screen-based attraction because it feels so real that it doesn't mess with my head as much as other screen-based attractions do. Now, I'm not going to do this on a full stomach. I'm not going to do this if I'm not feeling well. But if I'm feeling right and up to it, I could do this attraction, and it's amazing. So to not make this totally about my motion sickness, the part of this that is the most ingenious. Yeah, sorry, guys. The part of this that is the most ingenious is the actual ride system. Now, Soarin' is the most comparable ride system, but with Soarin', you load, which is honestly ingenious in itself. I mean, you all load on the ground floor. They take the system, this giant arm brings you up. But this one is one big 3-story theater, and there's 4 of them in this attraction. So that's a lot of ride, and it's on this almost pulley system. The best way I heard it described is it's kind of like if you picture those like Venetian blinds that you can move them up or down, or you can tilt them forward or backwards. It's basically that same type of system on this straight vertical, just like this image shows, and the way that and then they have these 3-level platforms, and on each platform there are 8 link chairs, and those link chairs individually are on their own system, their own pivot system. They can pivot forwards or left or right or backwards, almost any direction, in 360 degrees. And the way they integrate it with the screen, you really do feel like you're flying. And then you add on top of that the wind effects, the smells. I ride the attraction for the smells. Lisa knows that. I think Collin knows that too. And then the fact that they take that a step further and they actually make it feel like the Banshee is breathing. The vehicle is alive. I mean, that everything about it is ingenious, but the actual ride system itself is what makes this possible. And I can't wait to do. I've done a Flight of Passage episode before, way back in the day. It was like episode 10. And since I've now done these episodes more, I've realized I need to redo this because I did not do it justice. So I'm going to be redoing it at some point. But I have more questions to ask, more Imagineers to talk to. I'm going to end it there. It's just an ingenious ride.
Carlos, before we go on to mine, do we want to give Matt a minute to kind of share some things?
I'll keep this short. You can find me at ImagineerPodcast.com and at Imagineer Podcast on all social media channels and podcast apps out there. If you like Disney, I think you'll probably like the show. You can give it a shot and see if it's for you. And just check it out. But thanks to all you guys for having me on here.
I will say, you're one of the nicer people I've met in the Disney space, and that speaks volumes for a lot of us. I really appreciate you being willing to come and join us on this.
Collin, your number one.
So
number one.
We talked about Rise of the Resistance a little bit, but I wanted to kind of narrow down my focus as far as what I wanted to say on Rise of the Resistance. It's actually the little transport vehicle between when you go into the hologram room and before you get into the kind of the hangar area. And it's kind of amazing to me because there is, and I probably should have clarified this to Carlos, not the little robot thing that we're seeing on screen,
I know,
but the giant transport vehicle.
Yeah, but
and neither one of us, I don't think, had a picture of that for some unknown reason. But it is kind of unique in that when you step into that vehicle, you don't expect it to do what it does and to end up where you end up. And even from like a mental standpoint, it kind of messes with your head a little bit because you step into it and the first time you ride it, you're like, what? Wait, where am I? And it's nice in a weird way because it is that anticipation builder. You don't know what to expect and you don't think it's going to go anywhere. And if so, you think it's not going to go too far, but somehow you end up in a place that you would have never expected and you come out of the same door that you entered. Which to me is kind of a fascinating thing in and of itself. And I'm sure there's some elaborate scheme as to how this happens, and it's probably much simpler than any of us realize. But there is so much magic there. Well, thanks, Jason. You're so nice. But it is impressive, and it's at a scale that only Disney could recreate well. It's like the stretching room on steroids in a way.
Okay, so let's go to Jason's.
So I'm going to kind of go off the attraction route, and my number one is actually an area or a land per se in Animal Kingdom, and that is all of Asia in Animal Kingdom. Because for me, even compared to Galaxy's Edge and all the other things, I think that this particular area is the most immersive, well-imagined space in all of Disney properties that I've set foot in. The fact that they created this fictional kingdom and blended Cambodia and India and Indonesia and Mongolia and Nepal and Thailand and probably something else in there.
Now you're just listing things.
And then it was all true. And then they weave the story of the royal family in, and it sits there nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas, hence Everest. But it's not just about the story behind the space, but the architecture, the blending of architectural styles. I was pointing this out to my kids when we were there recently, like looking at the bulletin boards, that are posted here and there, and things for sale or things happening, and like there's this level of authenticity. There's this level of imagination and thought and attention to detail that went into this space that I just have not found anywhere else. And it's from the large scale stuff down to the nitty gritty little things that most people frankly won't see. And that's one of my favorite things about Imagineering. I think that's what makes Imagineering so special, and like the pantheon of organizations and groups that do similar work, right? It's that they will spend clearly tons and tons of time on something and like just inserting some little fine element of detail that very few people are ever going to pay attention to or see. And it's just like our everyday life, how we go out the door and we do our thing and we don't pay attention to like the little details that pass us by or we pass by, but they're there, and that adds the authenticity of a space. And I just feel like they knocked it way out of the park. And of course, this has got Joe Rohde written all over it. I'm in love with Asia.
I totally get you on Asia, and I have to ask, because you say you love Asia, have you noticed the detail in the pathway itself in Asia?
Some of it. I don't think that's what I'm saying. Every time I go, I notice different things. So what are you like? Are you
the next time you go? Pay attention to
which
this.
section?
This is my favorite detail.
Okay.
As you mentioned, there's different parts of Asia inspired different parts of the land Asia. And the area by Kali River Rapids is supposed to be the wetlands of Anandapur, so it's Thailand, Cambodia, like you mentioned. And then up by Expedition Everest, it's Nepal, so it's sort of the highlands, the mountainous regions. If you look at the footprints, or if you look at the pathway by Kali River Rapids, they're mostly using bikes. So you'll see bike tracks and some footprints, but you can't bike up in the mountains as easily. So as you walk towards Expedition Everest, you'll start to see hoof prints and footprints of people walking and taking oxen up the mountains, which is like, who's looking at their feet at the ground? But it's just such a subtle. It's
right.
Such a
Well,
group
and you
of
see
us.
those, and you do see those things, and you see those things introduced. I mean, in Galaxy's Edge, of course, those elements are there in the pavement, and in Storybook Circus, right? The little peanuts, the peanut shells, and things. I mean, I just love that. I love that. You have to look up, you have to look down, you have to look all around to really appreciate the full breadth of Imagineering genius. It's great.
Okay, so let's go to my first one. My whole thing is not the attraction itself, but it's actually what they did in terms of the track system inside the sphere. For me, what is the crazy thing is what they did to put everything inside there. You have to remember that up to that moment, most of their attractions were designed thinking about backlot studios, where you have sessions and or like that, and suddenly they put something inside that sphere.
So, I thought you were going to mention Phoenician Bay, but
no.
Don't get him started on that.
That is a scene. That is a Marvel. We have to do marvelous scenes, but not that is the track system itself.
Well, this was a good segment. Perfect.
Yeah.
I appreciate you all having me on.
Yeah, it was
Matt,
great.
thank you so much for
fun to have you.
doing this. We'd love to have you back at some point.
Yes, we
Please.
have.
And this time I will make sure to block off 2 hours because I did not realize.
You should watch the rest of this show later before you really agree.
I will. Make sure I know what I'm signing up for before,
Exactly.
before I do. No, this was so much fun. Thank you all so much for having me on, and I'll be looking forward to my next invite. So we'll come back and hopefully do this again.
Awesome.